The Human Doll Experiment. Tonight's story drifts in slowly, like fog rolling over an abandoned playground. It is quiet, soft, almost unnervingly calm. Because the events you're about to hear do not involve screaming, chaos, or sudden violence. Instead, they involve stillness, silence, and the unsettling idea that a person can be present, yet not truly human anymore. This is the story of the Human Doll Experiment, a forgotten Japanese horror tale whispered about in old paranormal forums, late-night radio shows, and among psychology students who swear it once appeared in an obscure research paper before mysteriously disappearing. Set in the 1980s, at the edge of a rural Japanese town, the tale follows a group of experimental psychologists who were obsessed with one chilling question. Can a human be conditioned to live, breathe, and behave exactly like a doll? What follows is a slow descent into obsession, stillness, and a realization that some experiments should never be conducted. Sit back. This one takes its time. The story. 1. The town of S. The story begins in a small mountain town, far from Tokyo, far from the busy lights, and far from anything most people today would recognize. Locals simply called it S. Not because that was its real name, but because no one wanted to remember it fully. Even in Japan, it was the kind of place that existed on old maps but not in anyone's memory. The mountains around the town were so high they seemed to swallow sound. Visitors described it as a place where even the wind moved slowly. At the edge of this quiet town stood an aging, grey building, a former boarding school from the 1930s. By the early 1980s, it had been abandoned. Or so people thought. But late at night, lights sometimes flickered inside. Not bright lights. Just faint, warm lamps glowing behind cracked paper windows. Most of the townspeople ignored it. They said an eccentric professor had purchased the property years ago and lived there alone. Nobody knew his name. Nobody asked. They simply said, "He studies strange things. Don't go near him." 2. Professor Ishida. Professor Kenjiro Ishida was once a respected scholar in Tokyo obsessed with the psychology of stillness, identity, and the thin line between human behavior and automatism. His colleagues said he was brilliant. But brilliant minds sometimes wander into dark corridors. After losing his funding due to unethical methodologies, Ishida retreated to the boarded-up school in S. But he didn't go alone. A small team of 3 graduate students, young, idealistic, and eager to make their mark, followed him. They were Arie Nakamura, age 24, specializing in behavioral conditioning; Yuki Matsuda, age 22, fascinated by experimental neurology; Haruko End, age 23, studying trauma responses. These students thought they were participating in a groundbreaking psychological study. None of them understood the full truth. Not yet. 3. Phase 1, the volunteer. The experiment began with a single volunteer. Her name was Aiko. A quiet woman in her early 20s, orphaned at a young age and struggling with a sense of identity. She believed that participating in psychological studies might help her find herself. Professor Ishida saw something different in her. He saw pliability, patience, someone who could endure silence, someone who could be shaped. The first phase of the experiment was harmless, at least on the surface. Aiko lived in a controlled environment. Every morning, she sat in a tatami room decorated like a traditional dollhouse, filled with porcelain dolls in perfect, unmoving poses. She was asked to mimic them. At first, she found it amusing. She even laughed. But the rules grew stricter. By week 2, she was not allowed to break her posture unless instructed. By week 3, she was required to maintain a blank expression for hours. By week 4, the room was silent, no music, no clocks, no sound except her own breathing. Rei, Yuki, and Haruko took turns observing her through a paper screen, taking notes on posture degradation and mental fatigue. But Aiko did not degrade. She adapted. She could sit completely motionless for hours. She learned to slow her breath, slow her blinking, slow her thoughts. She said the stillness felt peaceful. Professor Ishida smiled when he heard that. For Phase 2, the transformation. By month 2, the experiment intensified. Aiko was dressed in handmade kimono styled after antique dolls. Her hair was cut straight across her forehead. Her face was powdered to appear porcelain. She was taught to walk in short, measured steps. Not like a human, but like a puppet. Strings were attached to her arms and legs, not to move her, but to train her posture. At night, lullaby music played softly through old speakers. The transformation was subtle at first. But one night, while Haruko observed her, she noticed something strange. Aiko blinked, less. Much less. Minutes passed without movement. Her chest barely rose. Haruko approached her and whispered. Aiko? Are you all right? Aiko slowly moved her head, mechanically, as if remembering the motion rather than performing it naturally. In a perfectly calm voice, she said. I am still. That was all. Haruko recorded the observation, her hands shaking. 5 cracks in the team. Rei was the first to express concern. This is going too far, he said one night as they sat in the observation hall. She's losing her sense of self. Yuki disagreed. No. She's transcending it. Don't you see? Humans imitate everything: speech, behavior, emotion. Dolls represent perfection. Stillness. Purity. She's becoming something beyond humanity. Haruko said nothing. But she had nightmares. Nightmares of porcelain dolls turning their heads toward her in the middle of the night. Ishida, however, was unfazed. He believed that Aiko was achieving a new state of being. A perfect psychological blank slate. He called it the doll mind. 6 Phase 3, silence. In the 3rd month, Aiko stopped speaking entirely. Not because she was forbidden. Because she no longer seemed to feel the need to speak. She sat in her tatami room, surrounded by dolls, moving only when prompted. Sometimes she maintained one posture for over 7 hours. Her eyes no longer darted around like a human's. They remained fixed, glassy, unblinking. Haruko tried to talk to her one afternoon. Aiko, can you hear me? No response. Aiko, do you understand where you are? Aiko slowly turned her head. Her movements were too smooth, too controlled. Finally, she whispered one chilling sentence. I feel nothing now. Haruko left the room crying. 7 Something begins to change. After that, strange things began happening around the school building. Lights flickered even when the generator was functioning normally. Footsteps echoed in empty hallways. Doors opened on their own. Rei insisted they were overworked and imagining things. But Haruko disagreed. It feels like the dolls are watching us, she whispered one night. And indeed, Aiko's dolls seemed to shift slightly from day to day as if their positions changed when no one was looking. Yuki dismissed it as memory error. But one morning, they found Aiko standing in the hallway outside her room. Not sitting. Not waiting. Standing perfectly still, facing a blank wall. Her fingers were curled like a doll's carved hands. Her head tilted slightly upward, frozen in an unnatural angle. When they approached her, she didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't react. Ishida was delighted. She is achieving complete stillness, he said. A perfect doll. Rei felt sick. 8 The night everything changed. It happened during a storm. A violent one, the kind that makes old wooden buildings groan. The generator flickered, casting shadows across the hallway. Rei insisted they should stop the experiment immediately. Haruko agreed. Yuki wanted to continue. Ishida demanded it. Tension, he said, is the final step. Once the human mind is stripped of emotion, identity, and fear, it becomes pure. Like a doll. At midnight, the lights went out completely. And that is when they heard it. A sound they had never heard from Aiko before. A mechanical clicking. Coming from her throat. Haruko shone her flashlight into the tatami room. And they saw her. Aiko stood in the middle of the room, her arms slightly raised, her head tilted unnaturally. Her eyes were wide, too wide. "Rei," whispered, "Aiko." She did not look at him. She looked through him. Then, in a voice no longer her own, she said. "You made me hollow." 9. The last entry. The student's notes become sporadic after that. Pages are missing. Ink looks smudged, as if written in shaking hands. But one final entry from Haruko remains. Aiko no longer sleeps. She no longer breathes normally. She stands in the dark, unmoved, unblinking. The dolls are not just decor anymore. They surround her. They face the door. I think she controls them. Or they control her. We must leave. Professor Ishida has gone into her room. He has not come out. He never did. 10. The abandoned school. Weeks later, authorities arrived. They found the school abandoned. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Only rows and rows of porcelain dolls neatly arranged in the tatami room. Far more dolls than existed before. In the center of the room stood one human-sized doll wearing a handmade kimono. It had Aiko's hair. Aiko's posture. But its eyes were painted. Perfectly still. Perfectly blank. The official report concluded. All occupants have vacated the premises. Unofficially, the locals avoid the building to this day. They say that on quiet nights, if you listen carefully, you can hear porcelain feet tapping softly on wooden floors. As if something still walks there. Still. Silent. Waiting. This was the human doll experiment, a forgotten Japanese horror tale that has slipped between psychology, folklore, and the strange shadows of the 1980s.